Let me be the first to say I never thought I would do IVF. Never thought I'd need to, and never thought I would choose to go through it, but I must say after going through the entire process, it wasn't nearly as bad as I had built it up to be in my head. So for today's video, I wanted to do an entire overview of my IVF process so that hopefully you can have a better understanding than I did going into this. And I also think it's important to note that I was given a very common protocol. I think it's probably the most common type you get. It was an antagonist protocol. So it wasn't anything too out of the ordinary. This was my first IVF cycle, so they kept everything pretty basic. So please leave any IVF questions you have below because I do want to do a follow-up video to this. And I did a similar video for IUIs, so if you haven't gone through that yet, I'll link it down below, and it pretty much goes through the whole IUI process as well and kind of my timeline for that. But without further ado, let's get into the IVF process. So on March 28th, we decided to officially get started with IVF, and we made our initial appointment with our doctor to discuss it. So at this appointment, we found out our chances of success to do an IVF cycle, which is typically something they'll give to you. Ours personally were 69% for one cycle, all the way up to 90% for 3 cycles. And something I was confused about from the start is what is considered a cycle. So a cycle includes 1 round of an egg retrieval, however many embryos you get from that retrieval, and then transferring all of those. And at this appointment, you also usually meet with the financial person at this time to go through all the different options they offer. A lot of times they offer multiple cycle plans or refund plans. There's all types of different offers. Now, originally, I thought we would get started immediately after this appointment with IVF. I wasn't planning any trips or travel, but I had just finished my 3rd IUI cycle, and we agreed with the doctor that it was good for me to take a month off. Now, had I known that you have to prep for an IVF cycle with about 3 weeks of birth control pills, I would not have chosen to take a month off or like a period cycle off. So this is something I would be very conscious of if your clinic does start you on birth control pills first, which many do. It's shown to potentially help with the IVF process, and it also helps them get a very accurate timing of your cycle, which it needs to be for IVF. And there's also some preliminary tests you have to do prior to starting IVF, so also account for those. I had already done all of these, such as blood tests, saline sonograms, semen analysis, STD testing, and there's like a few other things that they may need, but if you don't have those, you're gonna have to do all of those first as well. So just take that into account in your timeline. So after taking a full period cycle off, no pills, no medicines, anything, this is when I started my 3 weeks of birth control pills. And the start date typically aligns with the beginning of your period. So you probably start the pills on like day 2 or 3 of your period, something like that. Something I did want to note, when I was younger, I was on birth control pills for many years. Never noticed any issues, but getting on and off of them for the IVF process, and I had also done this for some of my procedures as well, was really, really, really hard on me. I would actually say this was one of the worst things about the entire IVF process for me. My mental health and the side effects were awful. So during that birth control pill phase, you should get all of your medicines and injections in. Your doctor's office calls them in to probably your local pharmacy and likely an online pharmacy as well, because my local ones didn't carry my injections. I had to go through like a specialty online pharmacy. So my meds for an entire IVF cycle, including like the transfer and stuff, came out to about $5,000, which was right in the estimate they gave me. They gave me, I think, $4,000 to $6,000. So I was like, okay with that. I didn't really shop around with prices or anything. It seemed pretty average. I was reading what other people paid, so I just didn't shop around, but I have heard of other people do that. Now, the next step before you actually start with your IVF meds and all that stuff is to get a baseline ultrasound and labs. This is to make sure everything was looking how it should in your body. Your birth control pills were doing their job, kind of suppressing everything. I luckily didn't have any issues here, so we were able to move right along. Again, this is a step that could potentially delay your process. Now, this is the moment I was waiting for, starting the stim cycle. This is the part you typically hear about when it comes to IVF, and it actually only lasts like 8 to 14 days. Before I did IVF, I thought it was way longer, but that's about how long it lasts depending on how your body responds to the medication. So some clinics monitor your progress with ultrasounds and blood work every other day during this whole period. They look at your follicles, they see how they're progressing and measuring. They will either lengthen your treatment cycle, they can adjust the actual amount of injection you're giving yourself, so they could play around with those numbers a bit. They adjusted my medicines one time, but for me, I had 4 appointments during this window. So this was the stage that I was most worried about during the whole process because of the daily injections. I didn't know how they would make me feel. It was honestly way less medications than I was expecting. They give you like a little calendar chart so it's easy and you don't have to like remember things. Most days I was taking like 3 or 4 different oral medications, and some of those were very basic, like baby aspirin. And then I was really only taking about 2 injections daily, which were really small and painless. So first is the low dose HCG that I have to draw myself with the needle. I find this one a little harder to insert, I don't know why. I always just have a little more trouble with it. And then my other injection comes in this pen, and all you do is use one of these that screw on for it's a new needle, but you use the same pen for a few days. So then you just twist to the dosage. And originally I thought this one would be harder, but for some reason I just find it easier just because it's like a bulkier pen, I guess, and you just press it. The needle's a little smaller also. And I ended up doing this for 12 days, which was a bit on the longer side, but it was just based upon how my body was responding. And I actually chronicled how I felt every day. Day 3, headaches gone, feeling great. Day 4, still feeling good, just a little more tired than yesterday. Day 5, probably my last day at the gym. It was rough, but I'm feeling good. Just a little tightness, uncomfortableness in this area. It's the end of day 6. I'm a little short of breath. I'm a little uncomfortable. My headache's a little bit back, but overall, still feeling good. Day 7, almost forgot to film this. A little short of breath, tired, but still feeling good. Day 8, went on a walk today, feeling really good. Day 9, my bra's a little too small now. I'm feeling a little more uncomfortable, but I'm still waiting for like something bad to hit me. Day 10, feeling good. Day 11, uncomfortable, but okay. Day 12, and just out of breath and uncomfortable. Day 13, really uncomfortable and short of breath. Day 14, woke up with a migraine, but surgery's tomorrow. Now, once you've been monitored, your nurses will let you know exactly when your follicles are mature enough to do a trigger shot. They typically need to measure between like 18 to 22 millimeters if you've done an IUI, very similar to this. Once you find out when your trigger shot is, you'll have your actual egg retrieval surgery date and time. They give you a rough estimate at the beginning, but mine definitely changed and yours probably will too, just depending on the results. So it's just kind of an estimate, but now you'll know about 2 days before your actual surgery, you'll know when you're gonna have it. So then 2 days later, I had my egg retrieval surgery and we got 30 eggs.
You got 30 eggs, babe. 30.
Which was way more than we were expecting. My ultrasound showed around 20 eggs, so they could definitely be hidden. It's hard to see. The more follicles you get on the ultrasound, they definitely hide, so we were super happy with that. The next day, we found out how many of those 30 eggs were mature and then how many successfully fertilized. So out of the 30, only 16 were that mature size based on the triggering and all of that, and 15 of the 16 fertilized. So the few days after the egg retrieval were much worse for me than the entire stim process. I drank a lot of electrolytes and ate a lot of protein to help prevent ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It's called OHSS. If you're going through IVF, probably have heard of it, and because I had so many eggs, I was definitely worried about this. My age, the number of eggs, there's certain risk factors, so I feel like I probably got a very mild form of this. I didn't have to be hospitalized, which some people do. It's the day after my egg retrieval. I thought the pain would be like unbearable after the egg retrieval. I'm doing good. I have a headache today. I think some of my hormones are just like crashing. I've been so hungry. I definitely would not have wanted to work today. I would recommend taking a couple days off, but pain-wise, everything is very manageable. Day 2 after egg retrieval, it's been rough. I just feel like I'm crashing. The waiting game for this was definitely the hardest part. So 6 days after our egg retrieval, we found out how many embryos we got and how many, survived the whole process, because they have to make it typically to a 5-day embryo to be transferred. Sometimes it's 6-day. Some places will transfer like a 3-day. It really depends, but I feel like they typically do a 5-day embryo.
Is there more?
That's what I guessed.
So is that like it?
Yeah, that's it.
Wow.
Are you happy?
It's 5 shots.
So we ended up with 5. So these embryos got stored into cryo storage for a later transfer, since our clinic doesn't do fresh transfers and wants to give your body time to heal. And this was another thing I wasn't really planning on, because I was hoping to roll right into a fresh transfer, which would typically take place a few days like after your egg retrieval. So it was another kind of timeline setback. A week out from egg retrieval, and I'd say I'm feeling about 80% physically back to normal, maybe 90%, feeling pretty good. Mentally, a bit of a struggle with the hormone drop, but I'm on my road to recovery. So at this point in the journey, all of our embryos were in cryo storage, as we chose not to do genetic testing. If you choose to do this, it can sometimes set your timeline back a few weeks. And then I also had to start birth control pills again for another 3 weeks, which again, I hated that part, and that's to prepare yourself for the transfer. Now, a transfer typically takes like 4 to 6 weeks, because you have to do the birth control pills, and then you have to kind of align it up with your period. And that's like the timeline they gave me at my clinic. But because I did this over the summertime, they said they were busy with a lot of IVF patients, doctors on vacation. I actually had to wait a full 8 weeks for my transfer, which was a big bummer. So then for the transfer time, I had another baseline appointment to make sure everything was healed from my egg retrieval and to get started with my transfer. Now, excluding the birth control pills, the transfer prep itself is a lot shorter than the stim process. It typically takes only about 5 to 6 days and consisted of estrogen pills, a steroid pill, which I hated because it kept me up like all night long. I felt wired. And then the only injection I had during this time was progesterone and oil. So this is the injection everyone warned you about. It's thick, it needs to be warmed up and massaged into your skin, and it's intramuscular, so it goes much deeper than all the other ones did that just went into your stomach during the stim process. It's honestly not painful. The needle does look intimidating, especially like if I had Andy do it and he doesn't know how to give injections, but it's not painful if you hit the right spot. Oh, I literally didn't feel it. I was gonna be like, did you get it in my skin? There's definitely some days when I didn't hit the right spot. And now finally, after that prep, it's time for the transfer, which is the super exciting part. It's not painful. The procedure itself only takes a few minutes. So after you're prepped, you're awake the whole time. It's very similar to an IUI, so I wasn't really nervous at all. And then after they transfer that, you just go about your life, and now it's the 2-week wait. Now the 2-week wait is really 12 days for me, and during this time, you have to continue all those medications and progesterone injections as well. Now, the exciting part is you actually can test early, and this is exactly what I did, and I actually had the faintest results 4 days after my transfer, so well before my actual doctor's appointment. This was my actual doctor's appointment. They do a beta blood draw to confirm pregnancy, and then 2 days later, you have to do another to make sure those levels are doubling like they should, and that shows a viable pregnancy. Had another beta blood draw 1 week later, so 3 in total, and this was to check the levels again to make sure they were where they should be a week later, and again, this was super nerve-wracking for me. Then I had my very first ultrasound at around 7 weeks, and because of the IVF process, when they transfer an embryo, you're technically about 2 weeks and 5 days, depending on the actual age of your embryo. So at this ultrasound, we were able to hear a heartbeat, which I was so nervous for because the one time I did have a miscarriage, we never got to hear a heartbeat. And then statistically, once you hear a heartbeat, your chance of miscarriages goes down a lot. So it was just like such a big relief to actually hear a heartbeat. Then I had a 9-week ultrasound, and at this point we graduated our infertility clinic, and I was able to make an appointment with my regular OB. So we had 2 ultrasounds. So during that whole time, I was still doing those progesterone and oil injections daily, and I had to continue to do them all the way up until I was 10 weeks pregnant. Physically, I would say overall I felt pretty good the whole IVF process, more or less, but this was the hardest thing for me physically to do during the process. You just run out of space, you get lumps, you get like bruised, sore feelings. And for now, I've been done with them about 2 months, and I still feel like I have nerve pain left over from those injections. Just like that, I am 17 weeks pregnant, and I honestly can't believe that we were fortunate enough for IVF to work for us the very first time. In many ways, this process was much easier than what I built it up to be in my head, and in some ways it was harder with so many hormones and being poked and prodded. I feel like I haven't really been myself in at least a year. It's like I kind of forget what I feel like now being pregnant, and then with all those hormones, just like to have my baseline at 0 with no hormones raging through my body. It's kind of sad, but I just kind of forget what it's like just to feel like me. However, I will say the process itself was way longer than I thought and what I had read about. So for my journey, my start to finish was about 5 months. Realistically, I was expecting like a 2 to 3 month process. I read so many experiences, like I read on Reddit and forums that said to get started as soon as you can because everything takes so much time. And that definitely proved to be true. I do feel like some people can only take 2 or 3 months, especially if you do a fresh transfer, but there's just so much timing of everything. Everything just takes time. So I wanted to share this. So hopefully with my timeline and experience, you could get a little better idea of what to expect. So thank you so much for watching. If you're going through this journey, I wish you so much luck. It is a tough journey, but I am so glad that I did it anyways because it was overall not as bad as I thought it would be. If I had to do it again, I would. So hopefully that brings you a little bit of peace and comfort, and I will talk to you guys very soon.